Hey everybody, welcome back to the Convo Couch. I am Fiorella Isabel, and I am here today with Howie Hawkins. He is the candidate for the Green Party. He has just recently clinched the nomination officially, and we're going to talk about his policy positions and a couple of other things. But Howie, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Good. I've seen you make your rounds on media and independent media. And you know, I'm familiar with the Green Party platform. So let's just get into it, Howie, because we're in a time of a lot of instability. We're in a time where people are looking for leaders. People are looking for anybody to save them, which is a problem in itself. But the empire is crumbling before us. We saw our government yet again hand trillions of dollars to banks, corporations, and Wall Street while giving people $1,200 in breadcrumbs. And we're seeing people lose their jobs. We're seeing people lose their homes. We are about to experience a tsunami of that coming right now. But what do you, as a political leader, what would you have done during this pandemic, during COVID-19, especially regarding the CARES Act? I mean, how would you have handled that situation? Would you have voted for it? What would you have offered?
Well, I wasn't in Congress. If I was president, I would use the Defense Production Act to set up a test, contact, trace, and quarantine program. I mean, Trump is a loser. You know, as far as he's given up. Coronavirus won. He's out there like Typhoid Mary now getting his own people sick at these rallies. But where's Biden? What is he the champion of? I mean, he's within commuter distance of the White House press corps. He could be having press briefings and giving us some direction. Let's get the contact tracing and quarantine program going. And how about mail-in ballots? Are we even going to have an election in the fall? The money for that needs to go out now so the states have the resources to get ready. And, you know, what's Biden doing? He's invisible. So as far as the economic protections people need, yeah, they should have got, like Bernie Sanders suggested, $2,000 per adult, $500 per child for the duration of the crisis. We should add a rent and mortgage cancellation like Ilhan Omar proposed and have the federal government pay those bills so that you don't have a string of bankruptcies, community credit unions, small community banks, as well as the big banks, which would have just dug us a deeper hole. We should have Medicare treatment for all the coronavirus treatments, not just testing. You know, the average bill is $35,000 to $45,000. I saw a report somebody was charged $1 million up in Seattle last week for being treated for coronavirus. So we provide economic protections. So that's how we deal with that life or death issue. But that's just like one of about four that we've been campaigning on. They're life or death issues. And we got two governing parties that are presiding over a failed state. Right. I mean, every other organized society, they're out there testing and tracing and quarantining the infected, and they're suppressing the infections. We're on pace to have 250,000 deaths by the end of this year. It's a disaster.
And, you know, a lot of people are also talking about how anybody else would have handled it, right? We saw 8 years under Barack Obama, which largely for a lot of progressives was a failure. We didn't expect that. A lot of people thought he was going to bring hope and change. Then we have Donald Trump, who is the result of years of neoliberalism. What is your opinion on somebody like Barack Obama? Because a lot of the neoliberal establishment seems to be reminiscing on war criminals like George W. Bush and people like Barack Obama.
Well, Barack Obama epitomizes, as does Joe Biden, the problem with neoliberalism. They're for diversity, but not equality. They want a few people of color in high places without changing the fact that the masses of people of color have been segregated, discriminated against, and exploited for generations. Black America lost half its wealth under Obama's administration. They didn't prosecute the corporate criminals that were stealing Black people, Latino people, Asian people in California homes through predatory lending and foreclosures. And then the robo-signing, which was computerized fraud to steal people's homes. And they didn't prosecute these people. And you know where they are now? They're running the Trump administration. Wilbur Ross in Commerce, Steve Mnuchin in the Treasury. That's what, and then people say, we got to stand aside for the Democrats. No, the Democrats don't know how to fight the right. Their policy is going back to Bill Clinton, triangulation. Let's make a deal with the Republicans. And the people, as we said during Occupy, banks got bailed out and we got sold out.
Right.
And that was under Obama's watch. And we know the Obama administration coordinated with the mayors to shut down those occupations.
So in that regard, then, who's more dangerous, Trump or Biden? Or if is that even the question?
Trump has got to go. You don't put the Ku Klux Klan in charge. You don't put them in state power. That's like saying, the Redeemers in the South should have been in power to wake people up. You don't do that, because with that power, they do more damage. So you can say Biden is the lesser evil, but if it was Mussolini versus Hitler, fascism versus Nazism, you could make an argument that fascism was a lesser evil than Nazism. That doesn't mean you should support it. We really need an alternative. We need real solutions to these real problems, and we can't wait because we're running out of time on the climate, on the nuclear arms race, and on inequality. Working class life expectancies have been declining. The inequality issue is a life or death issue. People have to choose between paying their rent or their utility bill or going to the doctor. And as a result, some people die.
But Chris Hedges had a quote recently where he was saying how Biden was the architect of the system that enabled a Donald Trump. Wouldn't you say that's also something that you take into consideration regarding the dangers? Because we wouldn't have necessarily had somebody as right-wing or fascist as Donald Trump had we not had the years of neoliberalism.
Yeah, I agree with that. They set the table for Trump, and Trump came in promising a bunch of stuff he was lying about. And people, Hillary Clinton, I'm a retired Teamster, and I know Teamsters that voted for Trump because they hated Clinton, not because they liked Trump. Clinton to them looked like the suit in human relations. You get injured on the job and they tell you have to take disability, which pays half as much as workers' comp. That's who they saw when they saw Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump was an unknown. So they said, let's take a chance. But I think, they have buyer's remorse now.
Yeah. So Bernie Sanders, I'm asking your opinion on Bernie Sanders because obviously he led a movement that kind of propelled and woke people up to the corruption within our own system. And by and large, by many measures, he let people down, or people felt let down by him just dropping out and endorsing Joe Biden. He faced a lot of adversities, of course, but what is your opinion on Bernie Sanders? What is your opinion on democratic socialism and socialism as an ideology itself?
Well, Bernie, unlike all the other gutless candidates for president in the Democratic Party for decades, gave voice to what the people have wanted according to public opinion polls since the Truman administration. And that is a publicly funded public health care system, Medicare for all. And he did well, but the Democratic establishment cut him off. Now, he also shows us that you don't have to run as a Democrat to win. In fact, he won the mayor of Burlington, Congress from Vermont, and then Senate from Vermont, running as an independent. The lesson of his 2 runs in the Democratic Party is maybe we should speak and act for ourselves and not get lost in the sauce of the Democratic Party. Now Bernie's telling people to vote for Biden, and what he's telling them is to vote against Medicare for all and all the other good things that Bernie was campaigning for. Yeah, I'm a democratic socialist, small d. And Bernie was actually more of a New Deal liberal. He said, let's tax the billionaire class to fund some good social programs. The problem is, unless you have social ownership and democratic administration of the major means of production, the billionaire class is still there. And with their concentrated economic power, they convert that into concentrated political power, and they resist and roll back your social programs. So we need to go a step further to secure these economic rights that Bernie was talking about.
We're seeing a lot of people, thousands of people, march in the streets against police brutality right now, liberals and leftists alike. How do you feel about defunding the police and the movement of Black Lives Matter overall?
Well, I'm really encouraged, particularly young people. I mean, white people, people of color know this has been going on for a long time. Now, because it's captured on video, the white people see it too, and they're outraged. A lot of them are. We know that from public opinion polls. We see that in the demonstrations. There are a lot of young white people out there with the people of color. That's good. What I'm concerned is that they're going to settle for some reforms of police practices, like no chokeholds. You know, in New York, we've had a law against chokeholds since 1993, and that didn't stop Eric Garner from being killed, or that young black man that was rendered unconscious by a chokehold last week down in New York City. So what we really need, and I hope the movement will bring this up, is community control of the police. We need not just citizen review boards or civilian review boards, but empowered elected police commissions or councils that have the right to hire and fire the police chief, clean the ranks of the racists and the sadists, to review the practices and policies and budgets, and to investigate and sanction misconduct. So the police work for us. The problem right now is they work for themselves. And that's how they get away with crimes, including murder. So I think that's one thing. And then defunding the police, yeah, we need to shift a lot of resources. I mean, you don't send the police to a homeless person and give them a vagrancy ticket. You need to get them a home. If somebody's addicted to drugs, you don't send them to prison, you get them medical treatment.
Right.
If somebody's having a mental health crisis, send a psychologist, not a cop with a gun that doesn't know what to do with this person. So, but if you took all the budgets, all the police budget money and put it into those things, it's still a drop in the bucket to what's needed, because these oppressed communities of color have been segregated and exploited for generations. We need a massive federal investment in our cities: jobs, housing, education, schools, healthcare, transit. We need a Marshall Plan for the cities. So I want the demand to go from defunding the local police department and redistributing those resources. Let's have a big investment from the federal level and make things right in these communities that have been exploited for so long.
Yeah. Reallocation of funds, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Demilitarize the foreign policy and take a lot of those resources and put them into our cities.
The communities. Yeah. I agree. Malcolm X and Fred Hampton were two civil rights activists of the 1960s who really tied economic justice to social justice. And they were able to build coalitions, to begin building this sort of rainbow coalition. How do we take this movement right now that's happening in the streets with Black Lives Matter and against police brutality, and then go in that direction, tying it to economic justice, because we're seeing a lot of economic injustice right now?
Well, I think what we need to do, and this is the problem with the movements we have today, we tend to organize around single issue movements, and then we pressure the Democrats, and because there's not an electoral alternative, they take us for granted.
Right.
And the different movements around different issues are competing for attention, time, energy, supporters, and money. What a political party on the left can do is bring these different issues and constituencies together into a common program, and then advance that in the electoral arena as well as the streets. So I think, that's what Fred Hampton was doing with the Black Panther Party. They were building a coalition in a political party. And Malcolm X was interested in that. The Freedom Now Party, I know there are people who recruited him to run. He wasn't ready yet, but he was supportive of it. And I think, that's the missing ingredient for us. We need a mass-based major party on the left to advance these issues.
So you're saying maybe connect somebody like the Green Party with what's going on in the streets and kind of use that movement to build strength within a third party, whether it's the Green or a third party.
Yeah, well, Green activists, we shouldn't go out and preach. You go out and preach to a bunch of people that don't know you. They're like, who the hell are you?
Right.
You need to go out and listen and learn, build relationships, and support what's going on. And then when they start asking you what you think about a particular question, you can start talking about your thing, which would be building a Green Party or a mass party on the left. So we got to be organizers, not just activists. The kind of things union organizers know to get everybody behind a drive for a union or a strike, kind of things a community organizer knows to get, to keep people all over the neighborhood involved. And that's the kind of organizing, not just mobilizing, we need to learn how to do.
Election integrity is a huge part of the Green Party platform. It's one of the things that really drew me to the Green Party, especially after 2016. But do you believe our elections are rigged? And how should we begin to address that issue? Paper ballots, open source, both?
Well, I'm for paper ballots because you can always go back and count it and have everybody interested looking over your shoulder. And then you can get an accurate count that's credible. And that's why we should have mail-in ballots, given that this coronavirus epidemic, they can't even get poll workers out to man and staff polls, which means, you have 180 polling places in Milwaukee, but they have a primary and 6 are open. And you got 600,000 people going to one polling place in Louisville this week. It's insane. So that's part of voter suppression. And that's a big problem the Republicans push. But watch out for the Democrats too. They push party suppression.
Right.
And, the Green Party, people say we take votes from the Democrats. Yeah, a few, but mostly we bring new people out who otherwise don't want to vote for the Democrats or Republicans. We know, for example, that 61% of Jill Stein's voters in 2016 for president, we know this from exit polls, wouldn't have come out to vote. And only about 15% would have voted for Hillary Clinton. That means 85% of them, they wouldn't probably have been voting if the Greens weren't on the ballot. So we bring new people to the polls. And we got problems. I mean, right now we're fighting for ballot access, and we have to appeal to the state governments because we can't go out and physically petition and be in conformance with the public health guidelines. So we're asking for relief. Vermont put us on the ballot. Democratic government of Illinois said no. We took them to court. We won. They appealed, but we won again. So we're on the ballot in Illinois. Here in New York, under the cover of the coronavirus, when the budget passed, they attached a bill that tripled the number of votes we have to get in an election to keep our ballot line, doubled the frequency every 2 years instead of every 4 years. And if we lose the ballot line, tripled the signatures. So we go from 15,000 to 45,000 signatures in a 6-week window. That's party suppression. And that's part of, you want people to come out and vote. That's key. But both parties have their own way of limiting the competition or even limiting the voters in the case of the Republicans.
Should the public own the voting machines? Meaning, should the public have access to open source machines?
Yeah, any software being used in the voting process should be open to public inspection. Obviously, I know in some states it's proprietary. That's ridiculous. I mean, if it's proprietary, they can fuss with stuff.
Yeah.
Here in New York, they don't use software to record the ballots, but they do take paper ballots and run them through a machine. So that software should be seen. Plus, they do paper checks, the random checks, to make sure the machine count conforms with what they're getting in their random checks. That's pretty good. But even whatever software is used in those counting machines should be open to public inspection.
So what's your opinion on UBI? A lot of people like Andrew Yang this past election season were proposing that. Also, people like Tulsi Gabbard when it came to coronavirus. Also, Rashida Tlaib was proposing a UBI as well. What is your opinion on UBI, and how do we address those people that for some reason cannot work?
Yeah, well, I'm for a guaranteed income above poverty. This is the part of the Economic Bill of Rights that the Civil Rights Movement added in the 1960s to Roosevelt's Economic Bill of Rights from the 40s. And, Martin Luther King was for basically you build it into the tax structure. If your income's below the poverty line, which really needs to be double what it is now to be realistic, you get money from the government to bring you up above poverty. And if you're above the poverty line, you pay your taxes on a progressively graduated scale according to your income. In the emergency, I'm for a UBI, the $2,000 per adult and $500 per child, because you can just get it out quick and it needs to get out. But as a long-term policy, I oppose that. Andrew Yang's proposal of $1,000 per adult would get him to the poverty line, the poverty line that needs to be doubled. And it would cost $3.8 trillion. That's 75% of federal revenues. On the other hand, if you had what they call a negative income tax, what I just described, a guaranteed minimum income using the tax structure, it would be at the current poverty line, a little over 200 billion. And if we double the poverty, no more than 500 billion. So it's a fraction of the cost. And I don't know why we should be sending Jeff Bezos and, Bill Gates and Donald Trump $1,000 that they don't need. When we pay our taxes, let's make sure when we give people assistance, we give it to the people who need it. So I'm for you could call it a basic income grant, but the form would be a guaranteed minimum income, not the same money to everybody, rich or poor.
I see. Okay. We've seen a lot of journalists get arrested recently. We've seen our civil liberties pretty much be cut. Privacy, habeas corpus, etc., disappear further and further with stronger versions of the Patriot Act. Assange received recently, yesterday, a superseding indictment charging him, the founder of WikiLeaks, with a broadened accusation that he conspired with, quote, anonymous hackers and others. Would you pardon Julian Assange? And are we currently living in a state of fascism?
I would free Julian Assange. I can't pardon him because he hasn't been convicted of anything. And I would free him, drop the charges, and let him go. What he did was what a journalist or a publisher does. And if we allow these charges to go forward, it puts every journalist in jeopardy. New York Times, the Washington Post, all of them depend on leaks. That's how we find out what the government is up to. And the war on whistleblowers, Obama really escalated that using the Espionage Act. Trump has continued it, is a war on the First Amendment. So this is something that should concern all of us.
And what do you think we're living in fascism? A lot of people call Trump a fascist. I would say the Democratic Party also pushing for privacy or for anti-privacy laws, for just complete disregard, like HR 6666. Do you believe we're living in a state of fascism?
Well, I would call it an authoritarian police state. And Joe Biden was the legislative architect as head of the Senate Judiciary Committee of these crime bills and anti-drug bills that has made our prison system the largest in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. Fascism, I mean, that's where they have the state go out and kill people they oppose. And in this case, Trump had that instinct when he said, call out the military to suppress these uprisings against police brutality and racism. Mm-hmm. And the general slapped him back down. So I wouldn't say we're fascist, but we're definitely going in a more authoritarian direction. And we do have a police state. We got 4% of the world's population, and we got a quarter of its prisoners, just like we got a quarter of its COVID deaths.
So I was happy to know that you were a member of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. Give me your quick opinion on the following conflicts: China, Russia, and then Syria.
We need to de-escalate this Cold War that the United States, by its foreign policy doctrine, is we want full spectrum dominance, air, sea, land, space, cyberspace, and we don't want another country to become a world power. So we're trying to suppress, the rise of China particularly, but also Russia. Meanwhile, we got to deal with them, and they're not good actors any more than we are on the nuclear arms race and the climate crisis. We need to de-escalate and get into negotiations. So on that, in the case of Syria, the United States made that much worse than it needed to be. They used the rhetoric of the democratic uprising to say, oh, we support human rights. And then they said, those people can't win against Assad's repression. We're going to back these jihadis, or let the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Turks send those people in. And the policy under Obama is let them kill each other till they're ready to negotiate, and we can help negotiate a political solution. That's like what Kissinger did between Iraq and Iran. That's criminal. So what we should do now, we got troops in the oil fields. It's not even about the oil, it's about Iran. We should get the hell out of Syria. We should provide assistance to these refugees. We have the biggest refugee crisis since World War II. And these people are sitting ducks for COVID. And we should open our borders again for refugees and set an example for the rest of the world so these people can resettle. Definitely get them more food and protective equipment, tents or whatever they need in their refugee camps. The UN Refugee Commission doesn't have enough money to provide for these people. So that's another thing we can do. And in terms of that war winding down, we should get engaged diplomatically. I mean, right now, Turkey, Russia, Iran, and Syria are trying to negotiate something. And the U.S. could play a constructive role if it was not there to advance geopolitics, but what it says it stands for, which is democracy and human rights.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like there's the new Cold War with China, and it seems like that never really ended with Russia. So it is something key to watch. I think that's what we're going to be looking at. China and India as well. definitely need presidents that are going to. Would you say that you would be willing to meet with people like Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin and maybe talk about some peaceful resolution?
Yeah, I would if I was president, because
Right.
then I'd be listened to. As Howie Hawkins, grassroots, retired Teamster activist, I don't think I'd be there anything more than a prop. So I wouldn't get caught up in that. But, the thing I'm concerned about is this new nuclear arms race. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has the doomsday clock, the closest it's ever been to midnight. The U.S., Russia, China are modernizing their forces. The last bilateral treaty between the United States and Russia expires next February 5th. That's a strategic arms treaty. Meanwhile, 3 years ago, 122 nations agreed to the text of a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. An international campaign for the abolition of nuclear weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. None of the presidential candidates are talking about that. That should be a top campaign issue. So what I'm saying is the U.S. should take peace initiatives, cut the military budget 75%, start bringing our troops home from these 800 foreign military bases, get out of these 7 endless shooting wars, pledge no first use of nuclear weapons, disarm to a minimum credible deterrent, and then go to the other nuclear powers with the support of these 122 nations and say we want complete and mutual nuclear disarmament with world public opinion on our backs. And then, I want to talk to Putin and Xi and Modi and the Brits and the French and the Israelis and the others aspiring, and of course, North Korea. These things, we're lucky to still be here. If you read Daniel Ellsberg's Doomsday Machine, it'll scare the hell out of you because we've come very close, both by accident and by, as he points out, we've used nuclear weapons many times since Hiroshima. It's like putting a pistol to somebody's head and saying, give me your money. We've threatened nuclear. We do it all the time. All options are on the table with Iran. You know what Iran thinks? They might nuke us. And in fact, we know that there was a new tactical nuke put on our warships off the coast of Iran during that crisis in January. I mean, we're in real trouble here. And what's a shame is the mass media and none of the presidential candidates have even talked about this issue.
Nope.
It should be a top issue.
Absolutely. Speaking of foreign quagmires, there has been the issue with Israel-Palestine that has been one of the most difficult to resolve, one of the most also divisive. Are you a proponent of the boycott, divest, and sanction movement or BDS movement? Or what is your solution if not?
I am. I'm normally against sanctions. It's a form of economic warfare. But when the people who are oppressed ask for it, like the South African liberation movement did. I was very involved in the anti-apartheid movement. And when we finally got sanctions by the U.S. against South Africa, they decided they were going to release Mandela and, come to terms with their majority because they want to keep doing business. They didn't want to die on that hill economically. And I think we can do the same thing with Israel. My policy would be escalating sanctions. The first thing that the Palestinian BDS National Committee is asking for is to start cutting off the military aid. That should be the first thing. So if Israel goes ahead with this annexation of the settlements on the West Bank that they're threatening, cut off the military aid and then say, withdraw from that and get serious about Palestinian human rights and a just settlement. And then if they don't, we can take more steps. But I think instead we've given them a blank check. Really, the last time we told them to step back was Bush. I think it was end of the Reagan administration, early Bush administration. They said, we're not giving you military aid if you do these settlements. And Israel said, okay. But then since then, whatever Israel wants to do, we say, we're behind you. And that's why they're violating the rights of Palestinians with impunity.
Yeah. Is Nicolas Maduro, president of Venezuela, a brutal dictator?
I can criticize him from the left, but I'm not a Venezuelan. We have a bipartisan policy of regime change in Venezuela. When Juan Guaido, the handpicked replacement for Maduro that Trump picked and his administration, was put in the galleries at the State of the Union address this year, Trump gave him props, and everybody, Democrat and Republican, And I've looked at the videos. I can't find it that didn't stand up and give him a standing ovation like the Republicans did. I mean, there's another case where you're not going to get a new foreign policy from the Democrats, particularly Joe Biden. And, you know, I can make my criticism of Maduro and the different steps they've taken, but, you know, that's up for the Venezuelans to figure out. The U.S. should just hands off Venezuela, you know, and let them make their own accommodation. In fact, we should lift the sanctions and help them in this COVID crisis. Once we figure out how to help ourselves, we haven't figured that out yet.
A lot of people hate ICE, obviously, understandably so. Immigrants, they compare them to the Gestapo, but ICE is a result of a lot of our foreign policy. They didn't exist until not very long ago. Would you be akin to say something like abolish the CIA? Yes or no?
CIA or ICE?
The CIA.
CIA, I would abolish them as an agency that does covert operations. There's legitimate grounds for getting intelligence, like the early warning about COVID. And not everybody in the world is a good guy. I would drop the charges against Edward Snowden and invite him into my administration. I read his book, Permanent Record. It's the most compelling book I read last year. And, you know, his perspective is one of the central conflict of our time is liberal democracy versus authoritarianism. And he has a good take, he has good values and the technical knowledge to give us the kind of advice we need for cybersecurity and digital democracy. And so, and he knows what legitimate intelligence we need, but not that we should be spying on every damn American through the National Security Agency. So that is I bring in somebody like him to get that right. But covert operations, no, if you're going to go to war, declare war and justify it to the American people, and we'll be in very few wars. It'll be clearly in defense. And I don't see who can attack us, really, except for the nuclear threat. You know, there's no conventional threat to our homeland.
And you mentioned you were a member of the Teamsters, but you were also a member for the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Can you tell people more about what that means in relation to the infamous Teamster corruption under Jimmy Hoffa? Because Teamsters don't always have the best reputation when it comes to unions.
Yeah, they're a lot better than they used to be. We were under federal supervision for several decades. We just got out from under it. And the Teamsters for a Democratic Union were formed back in the 70s as a caucus to fight corruption and the lack of democracy within the union. And they kind of had their peak of influence when Ron Kerry, first they won the right for the members to elect the president of the union. And then when we got that, we elected Ron Kerry, who did a lot of good reforms. And then there was a scandal involving kickbacks between the Democratic Party and Teamsters that Kerry apparently didn't know about. He probably should have as the president. This is mid-level people in the Clinton administration and the Teamsters. So that explains it. I mean, I worked in a union shop. I had the benefits of a contract. That's better than me negotiating all by my little old self against UPS. On the other hand, the union needs more democracy and the corruption. And now that it's out, supervision has been removed, we're worried about the corruption coming back in.
If the Green Party has a little chance of winning, very little chance of winning, right? And then you have all these people telling people that any vote that's not for Biden is a vote for Trump. And we're dealing with corrupt elections on top of all of that. What can you tell people to get them to have faith in the electorate, to get them to vote? Because right now people just don't feel like it matters.
Well, a vote for the green ticket is not a vote for Trump. I mean, that's just simple logic. There are three columns, Democrat, Republican, Green. A vote for the Greens is in the Green column. It's not in the Trump column. So just relax and let's cool down and think through this. Now, if you're for Medicare for all, if you're for a full-strength Green New Deal, if you're for this economic Bill of Rights, a job guarantee, massive increase in affordable housing, public housing, college for all, student and medical debt relief, all the kinds of things Bernie Sanders was for, if you follow Bernie's current advice and vote for Biden, you're voting against those things. You're disappearing your own voice. you're getting lost in the sauce. They don't know you're a progressive. You voted for Biden. On the other hand, you vote for the Greens, everybody knows what we stand for. Your voice will be heard. And the more votes we get, the more leverage we'll have going forward. We don't have to win the office to have leverage. I got 5% of the vote running against Andrew Cuomo for governor in New York in 2014. And that was a year he wanted to run up his vote, get more than his father, Mario, ever got get more than he got when he was first elected in 2010, to lay the ground for running for president. And he got less. And he looks over here and we're sitting there with 5% of the vote. And he'd been running as the social liberal but fiscal conservative. And he suddenly rebranded himself. Now he's the pragmatic progressive. And he adopted 3 reforms that we were demanding he never supported before. A ban on fracking, $15 minimum wage, and paid family leave. And he even made gestures towards tuition-free college, but it was really a little scholarship that wasn't very effective. It wasn't that. But he felt he had to do that. We weren't taken for granted. He started competing for our votes. That's how we can have leverage. We don't have to win the White House to make a big difference. Just like Bernie moved the whole debate in the Democratic Party because he gave voice to Medicare for all. And a lot of those Democratic candidates for president this year either had to embrace it, some of them waffled on it, some of them had it, and then they retreated. But that was the debate. He moved the debate. Unfortunately, the policy didn't move yet.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep that fight going, the green ticket is where your power is.
So a lot of people, hated the way the DNC chose their selected their Democratic members. We saw what happened with Bernie, with Hillary. Now we saw what happened with Biden. The Green Party had its own share of conflicts within the structure. A lot of people were supporting multiple candidates. One of them was Jesse Ventura. How do you plan to get those people on your side that were so ardently excited about this candidate and that didn't pan out? They felt it was unfair. How do you plan to unite the party, so to speak?
Well, I don't know what was unfair. I mean, Jesse Ventura was not a candidate. He said, I'm not a candidate. So those folks are welcome to support us. If they're down with the program we're talking about, you want Medicare for all, you want a full-strength Green New Deal, this climate meltdown's ongoing, you want a real response to this coronavirus disaster, join us. You're welcome.
Do you have any plans, I guess, to do any debates live with Joe Biden, Donald Trump? Are you guys trying to get on that stage?
Well, I just tweeted at Trump, who said, I want a 4th debate. And Biden said, no. I said, I'll take Biden's place. I'm ready to debate either one of them anytime. And I would look forward to it. Man, oh man, would I look forward to that. There's a commission on presidential debates, which sounds like a government agency, but in fact is a jointly owned nonprofit the Democrats and Republicans created in order to keep others out. They muscled aside the League of Women Voters back in 1988. And I think we should appeal to the League of Women Voters to take their rightful place back as a nonpartisan civic organization and host a debate with all the candidates who are on enough state ballots to win the Electoral College. In this election, that will probably be Greens, Libertarians, Democrats, and Republicans. Let's give the voters all their voices and choices in debates. So that's what we'll demand. I don't know if we'll get it this time, but I think that's what we should be fighting for. We need to get this out of the hands of the two parties. I mean, back when the league was muscled aside, they said this is fraudulent. I mean, Dukakis and that year was Bush Senior. They started dictating to the league, how it's going to be run. And the league was saying, no, we're going to sponsor this and make it fair for everybody, but you can't dictate to us. So they created this separate commission. The league should, or an organization like that should be hosting the debates. And so we're going to fight to get in and, debate them as much as we can in the media narrative.
And just on a final note, what is the issue that you think is most pressing for the American people right at this very moment?
Oh, it's got to be the coronavirus pandemic, followed closely by the centuries-old pandemic of racism that people of color have known about, but now the white people see it. And we need a response to that because that is at the root of the class inequality we have. Racism divides people, and that makes the working class weaker. So if we don't deal with racism, we're not going to have working class unity in order to get what is our just deserts.
Howie, where can we find you and how can people donate to your campaign?
They should go to my website, howiehawkins.us.
And your Twitter is?
My Twitter is, I think, at Howie Hawkins, but I'm not sure. I always tell people, you can get to my Twitter from the website. You can get to Facebook, you can get to Instagram, you can get to everything. Donate, volunteer, and see all our positions on the issues.
Awesome. Anything else, Jonny? All right. Thank you, Howie, so much for this interview. I appreciate your candidacy. I appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. Sorry we screwed up on time, but keeping track of these time zones. I did one with Australia yesterday, 14-hour difference.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, all right, guys. Thanks for watching. Convo out.